Hello, community, and welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, C-Suite Trusted Advisor, Board Director, and Elite Team Strategist. And I'm here to help businesses deal and navigate well culture, complexity, and change. This month on Real Conversations from the C-Suite, I'm very excited to have Mr. Todd Levinson and Andre Thomas of Healing Race podcast. And our first conversation was just, if you were with me, I don't have to explain it to you, but if you weren't, you all want to go back and listen to the first conversation, give you context for this next two conversations. Todd and Andre, welcome back.
Nice to be here.
Did you enjoy our first conversation as much as I did?
Immensely.
Immensely. All right. Well, then let's get into the second one. All right. I want to talk to you about getting real about total diversity and what that means. Now, Todd, you have shared with us your Jewish heritage. Andre, you have shared with us your Black heritage and the fact that you identify in the gay community. When we talk about getting real about total diversity and bringing everyone to the table, including people who might object to past and current diversity approaches, what does that mean for you and the work that you do at Healing Race?
So, go ahead, Tom, please. Well, so for me, because I was a part of an organization that was making some progress in trying to attempt to do that. And with respect to race, they created, a group for Black employees to congregate and receive mentorship and everything. And they also began to allow some of our C-suite executives to come out of the closet publicly. And that was really groundbreaking to me because I come from an environment like if you were engaged in LGBTQIA behavior, you keep that to yourself. And some of the comments in the teams meeting this was top C-suite. So what a top executive of one of these companies came out of the closet. And people felt that a lifestyle was being shoved down their throats. Like now all of a sudden I have to be respectful of gay and lesbian and transgender people. And I see parallels with respect to race. So if you are a person who comes from an environment where you had limited interaction, or if your interaction with Black people was highly prescribed with an air of prejudice and bias against them, it could feel that now all of a sudden with this quote unquote woke, that you have to be respectful of these people when they weren't even allowed in my house. And this has come up on our show in a season that's about to premiere, where a guest was not allowed. They went to elementary school and she was not allowed in the house of her white friend because she was allowed in the house, but she wasn't allowed to go to church with them because she was there on a Sunday morning. Sorry, I don't want to get the story right. And so that could feel like a fast-paced world that's all changing, right? And what it's going to require is that people dig deep with respect to empathy. And so we have evolved Healing Race to have a certain pattern of, like, I was thinking like a checklist of behaviors that we ask every guest to commit to in order to create the environment for these open conversations.
Interesting. And Todd, when you all developed this checklist, what was going through your mind?
We wanted to create an environment where, one, people felt they could be authentic. And they can talk openly and honestly about their beliefs, their views, their backgrounds, their story, and on difficult topics. And the only way to do that is if people feel like their identities are valued in that space.
Including white identities. And that's hard for me to say because, to quote a prominent congresswoman, I'm who is tired of white tears. It could, because so much of Black identity is about having to be of service, even if it's emotional service to white people, right? There's the mammy figure exists for a reason. However, to echo what Todd is saying, and I apologize for interrupting you, Todd, I had to occupy a space of suspended judgment to allow, because I openly told Todd, I think you're naive and you need a cocktail and a trip around the world. I've told this to this man to his face. I'm telling it now. But I had to realize he is coming from a different experience, Andre. So even though, because I came into this conversation assuming white people knew everything, and they deliberately all of you deliberately do everything you do. And I was proven wrong. That's not the case. And that is an opposite coin of a lot of things they say about Black people. Please, Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great. If diversity is designed in a way that doesn't include all people, then those people it doesn't include are going to be oppositional to it, right? And if the values of diversity are about appreciating the backgrounds, the identities of people, then to fully live out that idea, those principles, you need to be inclusive of people who you don't think get you and may even be oppositional to you. I loved in your intro, you talked about a person who says, you mean I'm supposed to, sit and listen to someone who doesn't believe what I believe and doesn't value what I value? And I thought about it for a second. And I thought, one, there's an additional question that we sometimes hear that I feel like is sometimes even underneath that, which is not value what I value, but value me, right? And what I would suggest is that, one, there's probably saying the same thing about you, entering into the conversation. And Andre and I have had this conversation with people who are white, people of also, conservative, liberal, moderate, libertarian, all over the map politically, geographically, where they don't know if they're going to be valued, accepted in the space that we're creating because of their beliefs. So they're having that same conversation inside of their head. Second is that assumption that they don't believe what you believe and value what you value is often turned on its head when you really have a deep conversation. There is a lot that we connect on. Yes, we differ on things. Yes, we have different approaches to things, but it's on some fundamental things. There's a lot that we share, but we never get to that point because you mean I'm going to sit and listen to someone who doesn't believe what I believe and value what I value? That assumption, right? The last thing I say about that is either we think we know all the truth, or we have a little sprinkle of humility to realize we probably don't, right? And maybe there's something in the difference in their beliefs and values that might just, take off a little edge of something that we hold inside of us, expand it in some way. And we've also seen that happen on the program, through the way that we approach it. So that was what was going through my head, and I think both of our heads, as we were crafting those bullet points and as we thought about total diversity that would really bring all people to the table to have a real conversation.
And we ask for the commitment because you have to want it, right? So the person who's the guest on the show has to be willing to move away from some of their beliefs when they hear information that's contrary to the thing they believed, right? And that's why we ask for the commitment. And that can be hard for some people because it can sometimes mean breaking from your tribe, irrespective of which tribe you're a part of. And that's where I've seen the most psychological tension, especially when we get around contentious issues like reparations, right? Meaning what a lot of people think of as cash payments, but I don't want that, but that's what a lot of people think is what is wanted. Just give everyone some X amount of cash. And when we show them that you're not breaking from your tribe necessarily, but evolving your point of view based upon the lived experience of another person that you've been asked to trust, then there's openness, at least for the discussion.
Before I get to my second question, Todd, you said a few things that resonated with me and made me think of a couple of other things. First of all, I have said in the past that we need to learn to reframe diversity conversations from being difficult to being different. And when we talk about being different, maybe the difference is we've never had these conversations before, which is how you all established your Healing Race podcast. The second thing that I have come to draw a conclusion about is one of the things that makes discussing race so difficult is because the values that we hold are so personal that when people attack our thoughts, we feel like they're attacking us. And when people are attacking us, we feel like people are attacking our values. And when we feel are attacking our values, we feel like they're attacking the way we were raised. And so we don't allow ourselves or others the space to say, let me be very clear. I'm not attacking. I'm trying to understand, and understanding comes with curiosity. And we don't want people to feel like it's an inquisition, but it's curiosity.
Yeah.
So that brings me to having racial conversations without moralizing, and of learning to separate emotional reactions from moral judgments. How do you all set up your conversations to do that in a way that people are very comfortable to express themselves? And when they do disagree, to express themselves respectfully and honoring the person that they're speaking to as a human being.
Yeah, what I would say is, we do individual with our guests. We do individual interviews with them to really make sure that they're agreeing to these things, and we try to strike a balance between two important, aspects of what we're trying to accomplish. One is, and then we give them an approach to do that. One is, we want honesty, we want truth telling, right? On the other side, we want something constructive, meaningful, that ends in a better place. So we don't want to get along just by dancing around issues, but we also want to express issues in such a way that it moves the ball forward. And what we say to people is, please have your reactions to things, like feel what you feel. Mm-hmm. Let's make a commitment as a first step to actually get to know what you're responding to before you respond to it. Mm-hmm. Take that initial feeling and say, oh, you just said something, and I had a certain feeling about it. Can I understand it more? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that at some point you're not going to share, and we do want you to share what you have to share. I'll give you a moment or two from Andre and my conversation. Andre at some point shared this sense that he has that at least some portion of white people walk around with a sense of ownership, a feeling of ownership over Black people, right? A sense of entitlement might be another kind of way of saying it. And that could have been taken by me as a kind of character judgment, right? Mm-hmm. He's talking about me. I'm part of that group. He now thinks that this, is something I think about or feel about him. But instead of having that response, I asked him more about where that came from. And at some point, once I got to understand, asked him the direct question, do you think I feel an ownership over your life? And that by letting him share his sense of understanding and his experience of where he came from, he was willing to hear that question, and we got to dialogue about the way we interacted. Well, fast forward to the next conversation, and I, in between those conversations, remembered a moment before our very first recording when he was texting me about contracts and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I understood, he's like, I want to make sure it's 50-50, so forth and so on. And I was like, of course, but I didn't really understand where it was coming from until that conversation. And by having a curious approach early on, I was then able not just to get having the conversation, I was able to get the insight, but to bring up to him, I think I know where you were coming from when you were doing those texts. You felt like in some way I was going to take advantage of you.
Hell yeah. That's an incredible example. It's an incredible example, because remember, one of the things I've shared in the conversation just now is that so many things with Black people have been very public. And in that moment when I was sending those texts, I was thinking about the music industry and how so many Black people did not receive the royalties after writing songs, or their songs were co-opted by white artists. Somehow the contract was contrived to not have to pay the originator of the song, and then that song goes on to make millions. And there's so many instances of it. Mm-hmm. And I don't come from an entertainment background. I come from a tech background. I manage data engineers. So to me, this is all very new professionally. Mm-hmm. And I consider it, I just lump it into entertainment like everything else. To me, this is just another form of television. And I wanted to make sure that in this foreign industry and in this I've never been in business with Todd before. I've never been in business with any white person before, that I at least had some legal, and for the best part, he does too, protections.
Yeah. And what I wanted to link that to, Anita, is the idea that I did not take Andre's comments to me as any kind of attack. Mm-hmm. I took it as an experience, right? As an expression of an experience. And if we view it that way, then we can get to know that experience, right? Because that's really what's driving whatever he might be saying to me that might feel relevant in the moment, but really, but in some ways isn't, right? Mm-hmm. I need to understand the experience behind this. So that's some of the approach that we have when we're helping people navigate the feelings that they have in these conversations, and to hold back on the instinct to moralize about whether someone's good or bad, whether what they say is right or wrong, to one of curiosity that you can challenge, right? Later on.
You suspend judgment. Like I said earlier, the part of this process that's so important in the very beginning is training yourself to suspend judgment.
Mm-hmm. I think the other piece of that is it's very important to make a distinction between values as right or wrong, or values in this is what I value as my guiding light in terms of my everyday interactions. Mm-hmm. This has been another incredible conversation, community. I do hope that you come back for our third and final conversation with Mr. Todd Levinson and Andre Thomas of Healing Race. And in that conversation, we're actually going to be exploring creating spaces and approaches where people feel comfortable to tell you exactly what's on their mind in a professional, respectful way, and give us some tips and pointers as to how to do that. So please come back. In the meantime, if you found this broadcast or any of our previous conversations helpful, please repost them with some comments to your network. Our community is a learning community, and I want to hear what you have to say. And as always, please stay in the flow, follow, like, and overshare any podcast that helps you reframe hot topic conversations from difficult to different. Until our next real conversation discussing healing race, please come back. This is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.